guys, it's me. We are here for part 8 of Posted. Not really sure what's going on. My hair's all frizzy. It's because I can't go to the hair salon and get my hair done. We're on part 8. We left off with Rose actually sitting down at the table with the boys, and they're freaking out because they don't know what to do because they've never had another person, least of all a girl, at their table. So I'm starting on page 63, and I'm just going to go backwards just a little bit, okay? It's really not that hard, Rose said. We're just like you, only smarter. It was a joke. At least I was pretty sure it was a joke, but I was too nervous to laugh. You know, just talk about whatever you normally talk about, stuff you're interested in, like, what do you do? What's your thing? She looked at me when she said it. Our thing? Our thing was sitting here by ourselves, being goofy and not self-conscious. Our thing was not having anyone ask us what our thing was, because frankly, nobody else cared what our thing was, so we could do it, our thing, whatever it was, without worrying about it. I said. Dee Dee added. Well, Wolf said finally, Bench here plays like 57 different sports. 3, Bench said curtly, finally snapping back to attention. And he doesn't play them well so much as encourage others to play them, I added, which earned me the sharpest sideways glance from Bench. So you're a cheerleader? Rose prodded. He's a looking-at athlete, Dee Dee said. Bench started ripping off little pieces of breadstick, squeezing the grease between his fingers, then dropping the mangled nubs to his tray. It's cool, Rose said. I happen to like male cheerleaders. This seemed to embarrass Bench even more. He pointed his finger across the table. Dee Dee here thinks he's the Lord of the Ring. Dee Dee wrapped his arms around his lunchbox, drawing it close to his chest. Rose's eyebrows shot up. You like Tolkien? She asked. Yeah, Dee Dee ventured. I mean, kind of, but not really. All that much. Maybe. I laughed, only because I knew he had a shelf full of Lord of the Rings action figures and a replica of Sting hanging over his bed. But no, not all that much. Rose leaned closer to him. Who's your favorite character? Dee Dee looked down at his lunchbox at the picture on the lid. Aragorn? Probably, if I had one. If I was, really into it, which I'm not really into it. He also had a giant framed map of Middle-earth on his wall. Rose nodded. Yeah, Aragorn's cool. Reluctant, brooding king and all that, but personally, I like Gollum. Wait, the weird, slimy guy who eats fish guts? Bench dropped what was left of his breadstick, looking disgusted. Rose shrugged. What can I say? I have a soft spot for the tortured and misunderstood. She smiled at Bench, a genuine smile, not a sarcastic one. He didn't return it. And what about you, too? She looked back and forth from Wolf to me. I like short, hairy men, I said, so it's Gimli for me all the way. Rose laughed, coughing cracker crumbs across the back of her hand. It was the first time I'd made a girl laugh that I could remember. It felt weird. I meant, what are you interested in? JJ here plays sports. It's Bench said irritably. Right, sorry, and Dee Dee, is it? Dee Dee nodded. He's all about the swords and sorcery, so what about you? What's your deal? Wolf spoke before I could beat him to it. Frosty here is a poet. I'm not a poet, I insisted. I wrote one poem. Wolf here is an actual piano prodigy. He's won like 1,000,000 competitions. Only 11, Wolf corrected. I looked at him impressed. I didn't know it was that many. Seems like something I should have known, though. Frosty like the snowman? Rose asked, eyeing me. It's just Frost, Bench corrected again. Frosty's better, she said. She stared at me as if she expected me to agree with her, or was challenging me not to. I felt warm all over, but uncomfortably so. For a moment I was afraid she could read my mind. Bench pushed his tray toward the middle of the table and leaned over on his elbows. I could tell he was irritated. What about you? What do you do? What's your thing? Rose didn't flinch. What do you think I do? She shot back. We all glanced around the table. Softball? I said with a shrug. It was either that or wrestling. Lacrosse? Dee Dee guessed. Rose shook her head at each of us. Wolf snapped his fingers. I got it! professional turkey wrangling. Rose snapped her thick fingers right back at him. So close. It's wombats, actually, and I don't wrangle them. I groom them for professional wombat breeding competitions. Really? Dee Dee asked, eyes wide. It took him a moment. It sometimes does with him. Oh. No, seriously. You have to play some sport, Bench insisted, or work out or something. I mean, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I held my breath, waiting for Rose to take offense, to grab her tray and excuse herself, go sit down at one of the empty tables, but she shrugged it off. Nope, no sports. Though, now that you mention it, I recently considered taking up ballet. Silence. Were we supposed to laugh? You couldn't tell by her sudden stoned-face expression taking each of us in, maybe even daring us to. I tried to imagine her on the stage doing a pirouette or a pas de bourrée, but instead I got an image of her lifting Dee Dee up and twirling him above her head, then dropping him across her knee, snapping him into two, WWE style. I'm totally kidding, Rose said at last, breaking the silence. Seriously, I mean, could you even imagine me in a tutu? Wolf shrugged. Dee Dee giggled nervously. I shook my head, a little too empathetically maybe, then looked at the clock on the wall and calculated how many more minutes until the bell rang. Ballet, Bench snorted. Rose Holland polished off another cracker in one bite and brushed the orange crumbs from her sweater. To each their own, she said. And for probably the third time since she sat down, I became conscious of all the other students in the cafeteria who seemed to be looking our way, almost certainly getting the wrong idea. After lunch, Rose said she'd see us around. Her tone was casual, like she hadn't just contributed to 20 of the most uncomfortable middle school lunch minutes in human history. Or more like she knew she had, and she just expected us to get over it. That girl is funny, Wolf said after she'd left. Yeah, Dee Dee agreed, though he didn't seem too sure. I looked at Bench. She's different, he said. I couldn't begin to get a handle on what all he meant by that. It was impossible to disagree with, though. There was something extraordinary about Rose Holland. I couldn't put my finger on it yet, but Dee Dee gave it a shot. I mean, who doesn't like breadsticks? He wondered out loud. To each their own, Wolf echoed. I wasn't quite sure what he was thinking either. Not really into it, Bench said, eyeing Dee Dee. He was probably picturing that map of Middle Earth, too. Dee Dee reached into his back pocket and pulled out a thin stack of sticky notes. He quickly sketched out a stick figure wearing a football helmet and holding a set of pom-poms and handed it to Bench. On the top he had written, Go Team! Bench promptly crumbled it up and stuffed it down the back of Dee Dee's shirt, then threatened to find some real pom-poms and stuff them somewhere else. They tussled a little until Bench got Dee Dee in a headlock and noogied him into submission. They were just horsing around, I knew, same as always, but part of me wondered if it stung a bit, us teasing Bench in front of her. For a moment I considered the possibility that maybe he liked her, this new girl, and that's why he'd gotten embarrassed. I'd find out soon enough. The nudge. Okay, I lied. That day at lunch, when Rose Holland asked me what my thing was, I told her I'd only written one poem, which isn't true. One poem earned me my nickname, but I've actually written hundreds. I keep them in a notebook under my bed like Dee Dee and his box of dice. It's nothing special, just your regular spiral-bound notebook, college-ruled with a navy blue cover. I fill the pages late at night when I'm supposed to be asleep. The real Frost, supposedly, wrote his poems in an overstuffed blue chair. I write mine by flashlight, belly down on my bed with my feet in the air. I don't bring the notebook with me to school because there are certain people, certain types of people, who would take one look at it and find a way to use it against me. I realize most kids wouldn't care. Some of them would even think it's cool. It's the few who don't, who read way too much into a thing. Those are the ones who will make your life miserable. Kids who wouldn't know a heroic couplet if it was tattooed on their forehead, but who would take writing poetry as an excuse to be mean. Kids who would steal it, tear out the pages, and read them out loud in class, tape them to the bathroom mirrors, use them to stop up the toilets. They would come up with other nicknames for me, names worse than Frost, names that started with P, and Poet wouldn't be one of them. Some things are better kept to yourself. I don't share my poems with anyone, not even Bench or Wolf or Dee Dee. Not because I'm afraid of what they would think. I mean, we play Dungeons and Dragons. It's hard to be embarrassed when it's the four of us. I just prefer not to share. We all need something that's ours, a thing that we know absolutely about ourselves that others can only guess at. One day, I think when I'm good enough, I will pull the notebook from its hiding spot beneath the mattress and open it up for others to see. I will sound my barbaric yawp, as Mr. Sword calls it, over the rooftops of the world. But I'm sure as Sushi not doing it while I'm in middle school. I'm not an idiot. I know what words can do. Dee Dee broke out the sticky notes again in art class later that afternoon. We were sketching still lifes of plastic fruit that had been set out on the front table, taking the fake perfection of the glossy apple and golden tinged banana and making them imperfect again through our rough wobbling lines. It struck me as odd making a copy of these copies, but real fruit would have rotted before we got around to finishing our drawings. Sometimes it's better to fake it, I guess. I was sketching the bunch of rubber grapes when Dee Dee peeled off the top note from his pad and gave it to me. Passing notes had nearly gone extinct back when everybody snuck their phones into class, but only 2 days into the ban, the furtive art of note passing had experienced a resurgence, and teachers were probably wondering if it wasn't better before when it was just screens being tapped and not elaborately folded sheets of paper being shuffled under desks like some gossipy game of telephone. Dee Dee stuck his post-it to my sketch when Mr. Stilton, the art teacher, wasn't looking. "What was that all about?" the note said. I knew what he meant. He meant Rose Holland, crashing our lunch. "Guess she just needed somewhere to sit," I wrote back. It was the simplest explanation. It obviously wasn't the one Dee Dee was looking for, though. As soon as I handed the sticky note back to him, he began to scroll across it. "Yeah, but why us?" That was the better question. Because she has a soft spot for the tortured and misunderstood. Because she knew somehow instinctively that Wolf would ask her to. Because I smiled at her in first period even though I tried to keep it just a polite kind of thing. Like how you smile at your waiter when he refills your glass and not a, "Hey, you just feel free to come plop right down at our lunch table if you feel lonely" kind of thing. Or maybe she thought we were the cool kids and she was looking to score popularity points by being seen with us. Yeah, that had to be it. Okay, hop on over to Schoology and I will have a discussion for you.